A woman was murdered in her own car garage. She didn't show up for work, and her usual routine of responding to messages just stopped. To others, it was as if she'd vanished into thin air. And that's when the alarm bells really started ringing. The police were contacted, and a search began to locate her. But as the investigation unfolded, a picture began to emerge, bit by bit, revealing the circumstances surrounding her death. Gretchen Stoughton Anthony was 51 years old when her life came to a tragic end. Born on January 8, 1969, she spent her childhood in the northeastern United States, primarily in New Jersey. She graduated from Shore Regional High School in 1987, and then went on to continue her education at the Woodtope Coburn School, before eventually earning a bachelor's degree from Monmouth University. Her early career was rooted in education, where she worked as a teacher for several years, including a stint at a private school in Florida. As she settled in Jupiter, Florida, Gretchen had already made the transition out of teaching and into the world of corporate human resources. By 2020, she was employed as the human resources manager for an electrical utility contractor. Her colleagues described her role as highly people-facing and detail-oriented, requiring her to coordinate with staff, management, and external partners on a daily basis. She was known for maintaining regular work hours, being consistently reachable during the workweek, and was punctual and communicative with her employer, traits that earned her a reputation as a dedicated and reliable professional. But Gretchen's life wasn't just about her career. She was also a mother. She had a 12-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, and shared custody with her ex-husband. According to family members, Gretchen was diligent about staying in touch with her daughter, and made it a point to track her whereabouts and maintained daily communication. This routine, which included location sharing and regular check-ins, was something she had established long before March 2020, a testament to her devotion as a parent. In her personal life, Gretchen had been married to David Anthony since 2015. The two had met at a gym where David worked as a fitness trainer, and their marriage had lasted approximately 5 years. However, by late 2019, the relationship had begun to deteriorate, and they eventually separated. David moved out of the home and went to live with his mother. On February 28, 2020, Gretchen formally filed for divorce, the move that marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. In the weeks that followed, she took the precaution of installing security cameras at her residence. After David returned to the property uninvited on multiple occasions. Despite the end of her marriage, Gretchen remained in the same townhome in the Abaco, a community of Jupiter. She continued to work full-time, co-parent her daughter, and stay in touch with friends, co-workers, and family members. As the COVID-19 pandemic escalated nationwide in early March 2020, she communicated regularly with others about her work expectations, public health concerns, and the adjustments she was making to her daily life. These communications were consistent, coherent, and entirely in line with her usual writing style and habits, a reflection of her resilience and adaptability in the face of uncertainty. In the days leading up to March 21, 2020, Gretchen Anthony's daily routine remained largely unchanged. She continued to communicate with friends and co-workers, posting on social media, and coordinating child care arrangements for her daughter. On Thursday, March 19, she made a public post online, but after that date, her online activity came to an abrupt halt. No additional posts, messages, or routine check-ins were documented from her accounts after that evening. As the day went on, Gretchen failed to appear for a previously scheduled lunch with a friend. No explanation was provided, and no message was sent to cancel, a worrying sign for those who knew her. Over the weekend, she didn't respond to calls or texts from people who were accustomed to hearing from her daily. And on Monday, March 23, Gretchen didn't report to work, a move that was uncharacteristic and immediately noticed by her employer. As concern grew, messages began arriving from Gretchen's phone. The texts claimed she had become ill with COVID-19, visited the emergency room, and was being transferred to a federal quarantine facility. But the tone, grammar, and phrasing differed from Gretchen's typical communication style, raising doubts among those who knew her well. The messages were sent to her boss, her family members, and her ex-husband, a move that seemed designed to cover her tracks. By March 24, her ex-husband had located Gretchen's vehicle parked at Jupiter Medical Center. Her purse was still inside the car. But when hospital staff were contacted, they confirmed that Gretchen had not been admitted and had not been a patient there in more than a decade. At that point, the timeline no longer aligned with the explanation being sent from her phone, and the discrepancy prompted family members to contact law enforcement, sparking an investigation that would uncover the shocking truth about Gretchen's disappearance. On March 25, 2020, Jupiter police officers arrived at Gretchen Anthony's townhome in the Abaco to conduct a welfare check. The request had been made by family members and her employer, who had grown concerned after being unable to reach her for several days. The information coming from her phone had raised more questions than answers, and it was clear that something was amiss. As officers approached the residence, a neighbor approached them, inquiring whether they were there to investigate a disturbance that had occurred several days earlier. The neighbor's statement would prove to be a crucial piece of evidence. She reported that in the early morning hours of March 21, she had heard a woman screaming for an extended period of time, approximately 15 minutes. The screams had been punctuated by repeated cries of pain, a haunting sound that had left a lasting impression on the neighbor. Although she had not immediately contacted police at the time, her account now placed a violent event at the home on the same morning Gretchen was last seen. As officers entered the residence, they began to document the scene. Inside the home, they found signs of a struggle. A picture frame lay shattered near the stairway, and in the master bedroom, investigators observed blood droplets on the bedding and shards of glass. Towels stained with what appeared to be blood were found inside the washing machine, a chilling discovery that suggested a desperate attempt to clean up a crime scene. The garage showed additional indicators of attempted cleanup. Officers noted a strong odor of bleach and observed bleach footprints on the floor. Multiple bottles of cleaning agents were found inside the home, further supporting the theory that someone had tried to erase evidence of a violent crime. The physical condition of the garage was at odds with the messages claiming Gretchen had voluntarily gone to a medical facility, and it was clear that something much more sinister had occurred. At this stage, Gretchen was still considered missing, but the evidence collected inside the home led investigators to believe that a violent crime had taken place. There was no indication that she had packed her belongings or left on her own. Her phone, vehicle, and purse had been separated from her, a fact that suggested she had not intentionally disappeared. Based on the condition of the residence and the neighbor's statement, law enforcement shifted the case from a welfare concern to a criminal investigation, a move that would have far-reaching consequences. As detectives continued to process the scene, their attention turned to verifying the claims being sent from Gretchen's phone and identifying who had access to her residence and devices in the days before she vanished. The investigation was now focused on uncovering the truth behind Gretchen's disappearance, and the evidence collected so far suggested that they were dealing with a case of extreme violence and deception. Once the scene was thoroughly documented, investigators started working outward from the physical evidence they'd collected. Their first priority was to determine whether Gretchen Anthony was alive, and if she was voluntarily sending those messages from her phone, or if they were part of a clever deception. The detectives began by reviewing the text messages sent to Gretchen's employer, her family members, and her ex-husband, David. Those messages claimed she'd gone to the emergency room, tested positive for COVID-19, and had been transferred to a federal quarantine facility in Belle Glade, Florida. But when investigators contacted Jupiter Medical Center directly, hospital administrators confirmed that Gretchen had not been admitted and had not received any treatment there at all in March 2020. They also confirmed that there was no CDC-run quarantine facility in Belle Glade, which raised some serious red flags. This contradiction immediately raised questions about who was actually sending those messages and why. So, detectives obtained phone records and location data for Gretchen's cell phone. What they found was that, after March 21, her phone was no longer moving in a pattern that was consistent with her daily life. Then, on March 25, her phone registered a location ping in Pensacola, Florida, more than 600 miles from Jupiter, and subsequent pings showed the phone moving west, through Texas. At the same time, detectives were tracking Gretchen's vehicle, a blue Mini Cooper, that had been located in the parking lot of Jupiter Medical Center, with her purse still inside. But when they tested the vehicle, they found traces of blood on the steering wheel and gearshift. The presence of blood inside the vehicle suggested that it had been used after a violent encounter, not before a voluntary hospital visit, as the messages had claimed. Investigators were also focusing on David Anthony, Gretchen's estranged husband. He had been living with his mother nearby and had recent access to Gretchen's home. When police contacted him, David claimed that Gretchen was alive and receiving COVID-19 treatment at a government facility, repeating the same explanation they'd found in the text messages. But when detectives asked him to verify this, he couldn't provide the name of a facility or any medical personnel. David's mother told investigators that her son had abruptly packed his truck and left town with his dog on March 24, and financial records showed that, during his drive, David had stopped at multiple jewelry stores and attempted to sell women's jewelry, including items that belonged to Gretchen. At one location, he even told the store owner that the jewelry belonged to someone who had died of COVID-19. Cell phone records placed David's phone traveling west on the same route as Gretchen's phone, though the devices weren't always together. On March 27, David's phone pinged in Pecos, Texas, and the following day, it registered in Las Cruces, New Mexico. These movements directly contradicted the conditions of his recent release from jail, which had prohibited him from leaving the county. Each new discovery reinforced the same conclusion: the messages sent from Gretchen's phone were fabricated. Her movements had stopped on March 21. And David Anthony had fled the state while attempting to liquidate her property. But what investigators still didn't know was where Gretchen was or how she had died. That question would only be answered after they'd reviewed the digital evidence taken from her home. Investigators next focused on securing physical evidence that was directly tied to David Anthony's movements after Gretchen disappeared. On March 29, detectives obtained a warrant to seize David's pickup truck, which had been located in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Local law enforcement assisted in conducting a traffic stop, and inside the vehicle, Officers recovered several items that immediately caught their attention to Amazon Echo devices and multiple detached security cameras. The devices matched the brand and type that had been installed inside Gretchen's home. The recovery of those items suggested that evidence had been deliberately removed from the crime scene. Detectives in Jupiter coordinated with the security camera, a company that managed Gretchen's home system, using account records and stored data to retrieve video and audio files that had been uploaded before the cameras were disabled. When investigators reviewed the footage, they were able to reconstruct the events of the morning of March 21 in sequence. Shortly after 6 o'clock, David Anthony was visible on camera, standing on the lanai outside the garage. He remained there, silently, for several minutes, his hands holding a long object that was consistent with a knife. The footage showed him waiting until Gretchen entered the garage from inside the house. As Gretchen opened the garage door, David moved from behind it and confronted her. The video showed him forcing her backward into the garage. An audio captured Gretchen raising her voice, demanding to know what he was doing. Moments later, she issued a command to the Amazon Alexa device to turn on the garage light. A loud impact followed, and her voice could be heard again, this time shouting for the device to call 911. The Alexa audio recorded multiple attempts, each command becoming weaker. Investigators could hear physical movement, impacts, and Gretchen's voice becoming increasingly faint. The video feed then showed David approaching the camera, wearing gloves, and physically disabling the device. In one frame, investigators could see Gretchen on the garage floor, bleeding as David moved through the space. Additional footage showed David returning to the garage later, loading items into Gretchen's vehicle. A water jug smeared with blood was visible, and the cameras were systematically removed. The sequence left no indication that anyone else had been present. Based on the surveillance evidence, detectives determined that Gretchen Anthony had been attacked and killed inside her garage during the early morning hours of March 21. On that same day, March 30, investigators obtained an arrest warrant for David Anthony on charges of second-degree murder and kidnapping. With the warrant issued, law enforcement agencies in New Mexico were alerted, and officers began canvassing the area while maintaining contact with David, who was still communicating with detectives by phone and email, asking when his truck would be returned. On the evening of March 31, 2020, officers in Las Cruces, New Mexico, located David Anthony outside a convenience store, where he was walking his dog. Police approached him and placed him under arrest without incident. He was taken into custody on the warrant issued out of Florida and booked into a local detention facility. At that point, David Anthony became the sole named suspect in the investigation into Gretchen Anthony's disappearance and presumed death. David was 44 years old at the time of his arrest. He worked as a fitness trainer and had met Gretchen Anthony years earlier at a gym where he was employed. The two had married in 2015, but had separated in late 2019. In the months leading up to Gretchen's death, police records on witness statements revealed a pattern of escalating instability in David's behavior. This included multiple firings from his job, confrontations with women, and an arrest just days before the killing for resisting arrest with violence. As a condition of his release on that charge, David had been ordered not to leave the county, an order he had violated when he fled Florida. After his arrest, David continued to insist that Gretchen was alive. In recorded phone calls with detectives, he claimed she was hiding because she had uncovered illegal activity at her workplace and feared retaliation. He told investigators she had written a statement explaining the situation and even offered to read it aloud. The statement alleged that Gretchen had left voluntarily and implied that her ex-husband posed a threat to her safety. However, detectives noted that David refused to provide any independent proof that Gretchen was alive or allow direct contact with her. While David remained in custody in New Mexico, investigators in Florida continued searching for Gretchen's body. Despite the surveillance footage, blood evidence, and David's flight, her remains had not yet been located. Authorities believed she had been killed on March 21, but the disposal site was still unknown. The absence of a body delayed formal confirmation of her death and complicated efforts to bring the case to a close. David was extradited back to Florida in mid-May 2020. He was formally charged with second-degree murder and kidnapping, and was held without bond at the Palm Beach County Jail for several months. He refused to cooperate further with investigators and declined to provide any information about where Gretchen's body had been taken. It wasn't until late December 2020, after nearly 8 months in custody, that David agreed to a plea arrangement. As part of that agreement, he admitted to killing Gretchen Anthony and agreed to lead investigators to her remains. In late December 2020, David Anthony was transported under guard to an area several miles from Gretchen Anthony's home. As part of the plea agreement he had negotiated with prosecutors, he had agreed to provide information about the location of Gretchen's body, and investigators followed his directions to a grassy, wooded area behind a retail shopping center and near a retirement community in Jupiter, Florida. On December 21, 2020, law enforcement officers located human remains wrapped in a blanket, and the remains were positively identified as Gretchen Anthony. The location was approximately 3 miles from her townhome, and while the area was not remote, it was partially obscured from roadways and foot traffic. The discovery of Gretchen's remains brought a sense of closure to the case, but it also served as a grim reminder of the violent and tragic events that had unfolded. A forensic examination of the remains confirmed that Gretchen had died from multiple stab wounds to the neck and torso. The injuries were consistent with the surveillance footage recovered from her garage, which had shown David attacking her in the early morning hours of March 21, 2020. The findings also aligned with the timeline investigators had already established, placing her death on that same day. David's admission of guilt did not include a detailed narrative of the attack beyond what was already supported by evidence. He acknowledged that he had stabbed Gretchen inside her garage and later transported her body to the disposal site. However, he did not provide any additional information about his motivations or the events leading up to the crime. No additional suspects were identified, and no evidence suggested the involvement of any other person. After the recovery of Gretchen's remains, prosecutors finalized the plea agreement. David formally pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and the kidnapping charge was resolved as part of the same agreement. The guilty plea ensured that David would be held accountable for his actions, and it provided a measure of justice for Gretchen's family and loved ones, who had endured months of uncertainty and grief. On January 14, 2021, David Anthony stood in a Palm Beach County courtroom, facing the consequences of his actions. The factual record of the case had been thoroughly established through a combination of physical evidence, digital surveillance, forensic findings, and his own admission, which was part of the plea agreement. With no trial and no jury impaneled, the proceedings were straightforward, focusing solely on the sentencing phase. Prosecutors presented a detailed outline of the events leading to Gretchen Anthony's death, highlighting the careful planning involved, the deceptive measures taken after the killing, and David's deliberate efforts to evade law enforcement by fleeing the state and fabricating medical explanations. They also emphasized that David had violated the terms of his pretrial release from an unrelated arrest by leaving Florida just days after the homicide. David was formally convicted of second-degree murder, and under the terms of the negotiated plea, he was sentenced to 38 years in state prison. The sentence took into account the severity of the crime, the use of a deadly weapon, and the prolonged effort to conceal Gretchen's death. Additionally, David was credited for the time he had already served while awaiting the resolution of the case. During the sentencing hearing, David addressed the court, attempting to explain his actions. He claimed that his behavior was driven by his belief that the COVID-19 pandemic represented an apocalyptic event, and that he genuinely thought the world was ending. However, he did not dispute the facts of the case or the cause of Gretchen's death. The court was unmoved by these statements, refusing to accept them as mitigating factors that would warrant a reduced sentence. The judge imposed the agreed-upon term, and with the sentence finalized, David Anthony became eligible for release in 2058, when he would be more than 80 years old. The conviction stood as entered, bringing a sense of closure to Gretchen's family and loved ones, who had endured unimaginable pain and uncertainty. David Anthony's sentence served as a reminder that justice had been served, and that he would be held accountable for his heinous crime. In the months that followed the sentencing, Gretchen Anthony's family embarked on the difficult journey of rebuilding their daily lives without her. Her daughter continued to live with her father, while relatives took on the responsibility of preserving Gretchen's memory and managing the practical consequences of her death. Although the case had been thoroughly investigated and the facts were clear, the recovery of Gretchen's remains had taken 9 long months, prolonging the period of uncertainty for those closest to her. The Jupiter community was also affected by the case, prompting renewed attention to the risks of domestic violence during periods of separation and escalation. Law enforcement agencies cited the investigation as a prime example of how home surveillance systems, digital records, and coordinated interstate policing could be used to reconstruct crimes, even when a suspect attempted to destroy evidence and flee. The use of smart home audio and video became a focal point in discussions about modern investigative tools, highlighting the importance of these technologies in solving complex cases. Gretchen's co-workers and employer acknowledged her absence through internal memorials and policy discussions related to employee safety and emergency response. Friends and acquaintances described the permanent disruption to social circles that had revolved around shared routines, workdays, and parenting schedules. While Gretchen's death did not lead to new legislation, it was referenced in public conversations about stalking behavior, warning signs during divorce proceedings, and the importance of reporting disturbances promptly. David Anthony remains incarcerated in the Florida state prison system. The investigation has concluded with a full reconstruction of Gretchen Anthony's last day, from the early morning attack in her garage to the concealment of her body and the attempt to mislead those searching for her. And the responsibility for her death has been legally and formally assigned. Gretchen Anthony's legacy will not be defined by her tragic death, but by the impact she had on those around her. Her memory will continue to be honored by her loved ones, and her story will serve as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and awareness in preventing similar tragedies from occurring in the future. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.